The Sorento is Kia's largest SUV, and this improved version of the third generation model offers the kind of typically complete package we now expect from the brand. This enhanced design is embellished by a smoother automatic gearbox with 8 speeds and greater efficiency. And as before, it sells in the upper part of the SUV D segment, offering more space and 4x4 prowess than the cheaper class contenders provide.
Let's say you want a decently sized SUV for family duties. It needs to be tough and practical, but also comfortable and plush. You'd like 7 seats with a third row large enough to actually use, and a few extra touches of luxury wouldn't go amiss. Well, Kia claims that what you need is this, their third generation Sorento, a model they've usefully improved, creating the car that we're going to look at here. The brand says it was in something of a quandary when first developing the Mark III version of this model. They're undecided as to whether to make it more sophisticated and luxurious than before, or whether to focus more on the towing and off-road ability that attracted customers to the 2 previous generation versions. In the end, the company tried to achieve both objectives, with the result that at the original launch of this car was pretty well received. But time moves on, and so has the competition in the SUV D segment where this model competes. Back in 2015, when this car was first launched, it didn't matter too much that this Sorento lacked things like smartphone mirroring and autonomous braking, and that it had an automatic gearbox with only 6 speeds. By 2018, though, with fresh, tough competition in the shape of rivals like Skoda's Kodiaq, Volkswagen's Tiguan Allspace, and Peugeot's 5008, things looked very different. With so little to choose between the various major contenders, these kinds of details matter, especially since this Kia's design stablemate, the Hyundai Santa Fe, has now been relaunched in new generation form to offer even stiffer competition. Hence the need for this rejuvenated version of the Mark III model Sorento. Now the big news lies with the installation of a new 8-speed automatic gearbox, but there's also plenty else for the dealers to talk about. All variants get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring, and there are more dynamic, lavishly equipped GT line trim levels for the top variants, with the priciest ones now featuring Kia's AEB, autonomous emergency braking system. In short, in theory at least, there's now almost everything that you get from a large segment European badged SUV rival, costing over 50% more. It's all part of Kia's ongoing transformation from value brand into premium quality car maker. But what would the reality of ownership be like? Let's find out. By its own admission, Kia has never overly prioritised rewarding driving dynamics when it comes to this, its flagship Sorento model. Typical customers, the brand has always pointed out, generally enter the family SUV market looking for a robust, comfortable and refined driving experience rather than a memorable one. Times are changing though, and these days the company wants to prove itself the equal of its European competitors, and that means upping its game when it comes to ride and handling. There's only so much that Kia's development engineers can do in this regard then, at least in this case anyway. A root and branch change in Sorento philosophy would have been necessary to make this third generation model a dynamic match for large SUVs like BMW's X5 or even Land Rover's Discovery Sport, and that isn't what's been provided in the evolutionary approach that's been delivered here. The South Korean company has to consider its more conservative US and Asian markets, and in any case, the brand's well aware that many potential buyers still want to tow and they want to enjoy at least occasional light off-road adventures. In other words, they still need this car to be quite tough, and that means quite heavy. To be specific, it's just under 1.9 tons in weight, and that's bulk that you'll certainly feel if, rather advisedly, you start attempting to throw the thing around. To be fair, the extra torsional rigidity of this third generation design has helped to reduce body roll around the bends, and there's certainly nothing wrong with grip and cornering traction by the standards of this kind of car. Kia's flex steer system allows you to alter the steering weighting, and if you opt for automatic transmission rather than the 6-speed manual gearbox, gearbox, which is available further down the range. You even get a drive mode select system that can sharpen up the steering and the gear shift timings for a sportier feel. Now we should talk about that auto transmission setup because it represents the single significant engineering change made to this revised version of the Mark III model we're testing today. The 6-speed auto that was fitted to this third generation Sorento model at launch has been replaced by a more efficient 8-speed automatic gearbox of the Korean maker's own design. This offers up to 5 different shift and throttle programs accessed through that drive mode select setup I just mentioned. We would have preferred it though if Kia had concentrated on engineering this new automatic in a way that meant its installation didn't affect towing capacity. As it is, that still falls by half a ton to 2,000 kilos if you choose an auto model Sorento rather than a manual one. You have to buy in right at the top of the range and go for one of the GT line variants if you want to get the 8-speed automatic gearbox paired up with steering wheel mounted gear shift paddles. Not that this is the kind of car that you'd really want to thrash about using gear shift paddles. Approach driving this Kia with that kind of mindset and you're really rather missing the point. Better instead to relax and waft happily along on the wave of torque that's delivered by the usual 197 bhp 2.2 litre CRDI diesel engine. It's basically the same one that Sorento customers have been using since the previous second generation model was launched back in 2010. It is the only unit on offer with this car in this country, so it's just as well that it provides a plentiful supply of pulling power. The 441 Newton meters on offer here, easing you from rest to 62 miles an hour in around 9 seconds on the way to an academic maximum of 124 miles an hour. The Korean brand's premium aspirations require an exceptional standard of refinement, not something you'd expect a large, boxy SUV to be very good at providing. Actually though, this Sorento does pretty well in this regard, thanks to the considerable efforts that have been put into the fundamentals of this third generation design. Things like its extra body rigidity, the sleeker shape, and the vast swathes of aerodynamic shielding beneath the car. These measures together cutting noise levels by around 6%. Now that still isn't quite enough for full executive segment style silence. The large tyres and the door mirrors see to that, but it does deliver a surprisingly strong showing. And off-road ability, well, that rather depends on your expectations. Kia says that in developing the Mark III model Sorento, it sought to carry forward the capable off-road abilities which characterise the earlier generation models. The reality is, though, that the approach and departure angles of this third generation model are a little down on those of its pre-2015 predecessor, and ground clearance remains modest at 185 millimetres. Kia, though, refutes the accusation that this makes this more modern Sorento less capable in the rough, pointing to the fact that the old Mark II model's rather crude intelligent all-wheel drive system was replaced for this car by a much better Dynamax setup that actually is quite intelligent. This Kia still doesn't run in 4x4 form all the time. That wouldn't be very efficient. It is now, though, readier to cope when conditions turn nasty. In an older second generation Sorento, the car's four-wheel drive system clicked in only when you were already losing grip. In contrast, the replacement Dynamax setup is intuitive enough to anticipate when all-wheel drive will be needed and provide that extra traction ahead of time, which will probably be all you'll need to keep mobile on the next snowy snap or to take on the nearest forest trail. Those brave or foolhardy enough to want to do a bit more than that will be reassured by the provision of a manually selectable lock mode that splits torque 50-50 front to rear to ease you through particularly slippery situations at speeds up to 25 miles an hour. This Kia's relatively close proximity to the ground, though, means that these shouldn't be too extreme, but hill start assist control and a 16.9 degree approach angle should get you up reasonably steep slopes, while there's a 21 degree departure angle to help when you get down to the bottom of the other side. It is hard to imagine any buyer of this Kia driving to these extremes. Users wanting serious off-piste ability would be much more likely to buy a Mitsubishi Shogun or stretch up to a Toyota Land Cruiser or something with a Land Rover badge. Still, a Sorento owner wouldn't need to venture into the Serengeti to derive some benefit from the Dynamax 4x4 setup. We do, after all, live in a country where on average it rains on over 140 days each year, and on wet tarmac this car certainly offers a reassuring feeling of traction where the weather turns bad. That's aided by a clever ATCC advanced traction cornering control system that through the turns intelligently apportions engine torque to the wheels that can best use it. When a car maker describes the design of its vehicle as dignity wrapped up in a solid package, you have a pretty good idea what to expect from the model in question. Our Kia may aspire to be seen as a premium brand, but for the time being at least, it doesn't want to produce the kind of sporty, lower slung, more dynamic looking large SUV that the posh European makers like to offer. There is a reason for that, of course, and it lies in the fact that over half of this model's sales volume comes from American and Asian markets, like their big 4x4s to be bluff and practical and boxy. So that's what's been delivered here with this third generation Sorento model. Perhaps that is a little unfair. Aware that European folk prefer something a little more arresting, Kia's design studios in Korea, Frankfurt and California collaborated in the original design of this third generation model to try to deliver the necessarily spherical shape with more of a sleeker, swept back profile, but not in such a way that rear seat passenger space would be compromised. As a result, this, we're promised, is something that nearly all its direct competitors struggle to be, a proper seven-seater, as opposed to merely being a 5-seat SUV with a couple of fold-out seats for kids in the boot. There have been no across-the-board visual changes with this revised model, but the range has gained a couple of top, more dynamic-looking GT line variants. We have the flagship GT Line S version here. Detailed changes made to these derivatives give the Sorento a more dynamic look than it's ever previously had. The most obvious addition being these 19-inch 5-spoke alloy wheels, which sport red brake calipers. And these meteor rims work well with the rising belt line and the pronounced rear shoulders of this third generation Sorento design. It's still smartly practical rather than fashionably trendy, but at least now the finished product is more golf club than gymkhana. We like the little touches too, like the way these wrap over doors hide the sills and prevent you from cleaning them with your trousers when you get out. At the front, the sleek nose section styling helps to disguise the sheer bulk of this large SUV, the long bonnet flowing into a prominent chrome-framed interpretation of Kia's usual tiger nose front grille. That featured a distinctive three-dimensional diamond pattern. It's flanked by stretch wraparound headlamp units and prominent recessed fog lights that on GT line variants like this one feature a unique ice cube style design. Below these, a silver skid plate beneath the lower air intake attempts to emphasize a few SUV credentials. At the rear, let's highlight this sculpted registration plate housing. That's made possible by the more accurate laser welding technologies that Kia now uses, hence the narrower and more premium panel gaps. That's a feeling that'll be further emphasized, Kia hopes, by features like this shark's fin antenna, the integral rear spoiler, and the jewel-like LED rear lights that you get on most versions. Lower down, there's also another silver skid plate to finish things off, and GT line variants get these twin tailpipes too. Shall we take a seat at the wheel? Well, that's what designers from the European premium brands have been doing over the last few years, keen to see just how much Kia is now capable of in this, its flagship SUV model. The slightly lower hip point makes it easier to get in, particularly for older folk. But once inside, we'll start by observing that there's nothing here that's going to make the posh German makers too sleepless at night. That said, there's also no doubt that a huge step forward's been made with this third generation design over what went before. The plasticky utilitarian feel of the previous generation pre-2015 era model is now a distant memory, replaced by this Mark III design with smart wraparound dash that extends into the doors and offers slick soft touch surfaces, lovely satin brightwork, piano black trim and controls with clear classy graphics. Go for a plusher model like this one and you're even given one of those trendy TFT virtual displays to replace the conventional instrument dials. In the event, much of the effect of this feature is somewhat lost because it only replaces the central speedo rather than running the whole width of the binnacle as the TFT screen does in something like a BMW X3 or an Audi Q5. Still, the very fact that we're even citing those kinds of comparisons says much about what's been achieved here. The central infotainment screen is certainly more seamlessly incorporated into the dash than it would be on an X3, and it's much larger than it was before, 7 or 8 inches in size, depending on the spec you choose. Kia has missed a trick though by not building in the iDrive controller style functionality that the top European brands favour. Here in this Sorento, you have to jab away at the thing to get the stereo, sat-nav, phone or informational functions you want. Either that or try to master voice control functionality that, like all such systems, can sometimes be a bit hit and miss. As before, the driving position is commanding with good all-round visibility, except for that at the rear corners where the window line tapers away quite sharply, leaving something of a blind spot. Still, with big door mirrors and rear parking sensors fitted to all models, that shouldn't create too much of an issue, particularly if you can stretch to this flagship version with its 360-degree around view monitor and smart park assist system. With the usual adjustment for seat and steering wheel, it's certainly easy to get comfortable in a cabin that feels even roomier than it actually is. We like the seat design with its firm base and soft higher back support. And everything falls nicely to hand too, with ergonomic placement of the switch gear, which is difficult to fault, and the switches are big enough to be used by gloved hands. As for practicality, well, there's this large center console box here. There are twin cup holders with a sliding cover, and there's a large glove box and decently sized door pockets. Take a seat in the second row and there's also a great feeling of space, partly because of the extra legroom that's been built into this third generation design, but mainly because the designers have managed to all but eliminate the previous model's chunky transmission tunnel, and that means that 3 passengers can easily be seated. Headroom, well, that still isn't overly generous, especially with this large glass panoramic roof fitted, but taller folk will be able to feel more comfortable if they're able to make use of the reclining seat backs. Now that glass roof is worth having though. It offers this rather darkly furnished cabin a lighter, airier feel. Now, just mentioned legroom, another welcome touch is the way that you can slide the seat base backwards and forwards through 270 millimeters of travel, although the extent to which you'll be able to do that will of course be determined by whether you are in front of third row people behind. Now, time to see how passengers of that sort will fare. Now, it's a pity that you can only access the third row from the curb side of the car, and access to this third row would be better if this seat tumbled forward rather than merely sliding back and forth. Once you're in though, there is, as advertised, more room than you'd usually get in the rearmost pews of a typical D-segment 7-seat SUV. That's been made possible in this third generation Sorento design by an 80mm increase in the wheelbase, and that's freed up just enough room to more comfortably accommodate the couple of full-sized adults who would have been, well, significantly more cramped in the previous generation version of this car. Don't get us wrong though, you won't be as comfortable comfortable back here as you would be in the very rear of a Galaxy or a Charan-like large people carrier. There's just not enough headroom for that. But by SUV standards, it's really quite spacious back here. You would be noticeably more constricted in the very back of a Land Rover Discovery Sport, and even an Audi Q7 costing twice as much isn't noticeably roomier in this regard. Third row folk also get their own air conditioning vents and controls. Here's another nice touch, the smart tailgate that you get on plusher variants like this one. Stand within 1 metre of the car with the key in your pocket or handbag, and it'll open automatically after 3 seconds, and it can be set to raise to different heights. Of course, with these rearmost seats in place, there isn't much room for luggage, but then of course that's true of any 7-seater which isn't directly based on a van. With all 3 rows in place, you get 142 litres of cargo space. Now if you tug on these boot levers to fold the third row chairs, that capacity figure rises to 605 litres. The tonneau cover can be neatly stored away beneath the boot floor when it's not in use, although there's no room to store much else thanks to Kia's decision, which is welcome, to specify all cars sold in this country with a full-size spare wheel. More capacity can though be freed up if you're prepared to annoy any second row passengers by sliding the middle seats forward, and there's a useful 40-20-40 fold in the central backrest so that longer items like skis can be pushed through between a couple of middle row occupants. Flatten the central bench and 1,662 litres of fresh air can be freed up. To give you some class perspective, this completely flat load bay is 34 litres larger than that you'd have in a rival Land Rover Discovery Sport. Prices for this third generation Sorento start very competitively from around £29,000, although you can pay up to £42,000 for one if you opt for this flagship GT Line S version. This top model comes only with this revised model's latest 8-speed automatic transmission, while at the opposite end of the range, the base KX1 variant comes only as a manual. In between, there are KX2 and KX3 derivatives, which offer the option of an auto box for a premium of around £1,800. What is common across the range is four-wheel drive and the 197 bhp 2.2 litre CRDI diesel engine beneath the bonnet. 7-seat versatility is standard on all models too, and that's something that you can't always take for granted in the SUV D segment. Onto the value proposition that pricing represents, which is actually very strong. As ever with the Sorento, Kia's argument is that with this car, you're getting most of the key attributes of a large segment 7-seat family SUV, say a full-sized Land Rover Discovery or a Toyota Land Cruiser, costing £45,000 to £50,000, all for not much more than the price of a smaller, mid-sized C-segment 5-seat SUV, say mid to high-spec diesel versions of cars like Toyota's RAV4 or Honda CR-V. And despite the small price increases applied to the improved version of this third generation model, that still holds true here. This car's most obvious rival is its Korean cousin, Hyundai Santa Fe, and that's a model that shares much of the same chassis and engine technology, but which costs a fraction more to run and is a bit pricier to buy. Mitsubishi's Shogun also sells for the same kind of money that Kia's asking here, but the Shogun's now quite an old design, and its major drawback is that it'll be 30 to 40% pricier to run. Now you could have either the Hyundai or the Mitsubishi within this Kia's typical £35,000 to £40,000 asking price. The other obvious choice in the segment, Land Rover's Discovery Sport model, that'll cost you significantly more. You're looking at a premium of at least around £5,000 to own one of those. Remember too that the Disco Sport is a slightly shorter car, so its third row seating will be less adult friendly. What about the more recent arrivals in the SUV D segment that you might be tempted to consider? Well, the Ford Edge and the Renault Koleos are relatively easy to dismiss because you can only have them in 5-seat form. Peugeot's 5008, that also won't make it onto a typical Sorento buyer's shopping list because that can't be had with four-wheel drive. Skoda's Kodiaq, well, that's a much stronger proposition, and at first glance it looks much cheaper than this Kia, but that's only if you're prepared to consider a much feebler engine. You'll have to choose a Kodiak in 2-litre TDI 190 PS 7-seat form to get a proposition that's comparable to that of this Kia, and a package like that is going to cost you nearly £35,000, and that will pitch you right into the centre of the Sorento lineup. It is also worth pointing out that the Skoda is 83mm shorter than this Kia, which inevitably has an effect on third-row passenger space. Much the same applies to another comparably priced class contender, which shares the Kodiak's engineering, and that is Volkswagen's Tiguan Allspace. That car's 79mm shorter than a Sorento, so again, it's going to be tighter for folk in the third row. Even more cramped in the rear are the only other possible options that we'd pick out in this class. Mitsubishi's Outlander, Nissan's X-Trail and SsangYong's underrated Rexton. All three models cram in 3 rows of chairs over all-wheel drive mechanicals, and they could save you around 20% on the price of a Sorento. In each case though, what you'd really be getting is a slightly smaller car that certainly couldn't take 7 adults regularly in the way that this one can. A feebler one too, with about 25% less power. Now, for the kind of customers who will be seriously considering this Sorento, that recipe won't be very tempting. If, having considered all that, you conclude it is a Sorento that you really want, then with Kia's value-based market stance in mind, you're going to be expecting a decent level of standard equipment for your money. And by and large, you shouldn't be disappointed. So, as well as the all-wheel drive system and the 7-seat capacity we mentioned earlier, and that's something that not all rivals offer as standard, all models feature LED daytime running lights, front fog lamps with integrated cornering lights, headlamp leveling to compensate for heavy loads, reverse parking sensors, tinted glass, alloy wheels, roof rails, a rear spoiler, power folding mirrors, and nice little touches like front wiper de-icers to get you going on a cold morning. Inside there's a multifunction leather-covered steering wheel and a centre dash 7-inch colour touchscreen, and that gives you access to a 6-speaker DAB audio system, Bluetooth connectivity and smartphone mirroring using the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto systems. Other standard features at entry level include air conditioning, a reversing camera, a trip computer, cruise control with a speed limiter, a proper spare wheel, and hill start assist control to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. Do you want more? Well, adding just over £3,000 to your Sorento budget, that will allow your dealer to upgrade you into the plusher KX2 model, and that's a starting point in the range for buyers who want self-leveling suspension and the option of automatic transmission too. Now at this level, your car will come complete with larger 18-inch wheels, heated part leather seats, heated outer rear seats, dual automatic climate control, auto headlamps and wipers, and various trim embellishments. Oh, there's a sat-nav too, and that's courtesy of a larger 8-inch centre dash screen with European mapping and traffic messaging. The next step up in the range lies either with KX3 or GT line trim. In both cases you get leather upholstery, an 8-way power adjustable driver's seat, a wide view driver's door mirror, LED tail lamps and a customizable 7-inch TFT LCD colour instrument display to replace the conventional instrument dials. Plus there's some extra safety features that we'll cover off in a minute. Specific features fitted to the KX3 version include a panoramic sunroof, LED headlamps with dynamic bending, wireless phone charging, a 10-speaker Harman Kardon premium sound system, and a smart tailgate which needs only to sense the presence of a key in your pocket to activate. Now, alternatively, GT line spec is based more around aesthetics. It features 19-inch wheels with red brake calipers. There are projection headlights, ice cube style LED front fog lights, and twin exhausts. Plus, you get special interior and exterior trimming, along with gear change paddle shifters and front passenger seat power adjustment. Inevitably though, the real niceties are reserved for the top model on the range, the flagship GT Line S version that we've been trying here. That's a variant that apparently nearly a quarter of Sorento buyers choose. Now this includes every bit of additional luxury that Kia's product planners could think of, and that means you get a 360-degree around view monitor camera setup, a smart park assist system which will automatically steer you into spaces, solar glass, rear window blinds and cooled ventilated front seats that on the driver's side feature 10-way power adjustment with a memory function. There's extra safety kit too, and we'll get to that in a minute. Across the Sorento range, key options are relatively few, and apart from premium metallic paint, they're mainly limited to practicalities like integrated side steps, roof rail crossbars and the usual cycle carriers and tow bars. On to safety. Now, by and large, this car still lacks the kind of camera-driven safety kit you'll find in most rivals. There's nothing of the sort with the base KX1 and KX2 trim levels, but it does start to appear on the KX3 and GT line variants, which get three such features: a lane keep assist system, that's to alert you if you drift over the lane delineating lines on the highway; driver attention warning, that's there to monitor your driving reactions for signs of drowsiness; and the speed limit information function, and that pictures road signs as you pass and displays them on the dash. You have to stretch all the way up to this top variant's GT Line S trim though to get the kind of autonomous emergency braking system that all really premium cars ought to have nowadays. Now disappointingly, this setup isn't even offered as an option further down the range. GT Line S trim also gives you a blind spot detection system, that's to stop you from dangerously pulling out to overtake, and a rear cross traffic alert system which warns you of approaching vehicles when you're reversing out of a parking space. As for common passive safety features fitted across the lineup, well, you get an extremely stiff body shell constructed with extensive use of high-strength steel and twin front, side and curtain airbags, although no driver's knee bag. Anti-whiplash head restraints, a pedestrian-friendly active bonnet, a tyre pressure monitoring system and ISOFIX child seat fastenings also feature. And electronic features carried over from the previous generation model include ESC, electronic stability control, and VSM, vehicle stability management. The latter feature helps, for example, if you're in a situation where one side of the car has more grip than the other, say when you're driving near a grass verge. Plus, the anti-lock brakes have a brake assist function, and that helps in emergency stops, and those be advertised to following motorists by an emergency stop signalling function, and that flashes the rear lights when you slam on the anchors. There's also a useful trailer stability assist system to make towing easier. In developing this third generation Sorento model, Kia didn't have the option of completely changing the 2.2 litre CRDI diesel engine that's long been used in this car, or of substantially reducing the vehicle's weight. As a result, the brand has been limited by what it can achieve in terms of overall running cost efficiency, but it has done what it can. The diesel power plant, for example, was made lighter, more efficient and cleaner for this third generation design so it could meet Euro 6 standards. There is a sophisticated fuel-saving MDPS, motor-driven power steering system. All models, including the automatics, get the brand's ISG, intelligent stop-and-go system, to cut the engine when you don't need it, when you're stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. And the Dynamax all-wheel drive setup is more effective than the previous generation model's 4x4 system when it comes to saving fuel and when traction isn't at a premium. In addition, one of the main reasons for introducing the enhanced 8-speed automatic gearbox that features with this revised third generation model was to try to improve efficiency, and sure enough, the combined cycle showing of the auto version of this car has improved marginally to 43.5 mpg. CO2 emissions have been cut too, from 174 to 170 grams per kilometre. The figures for the manual model, they depend on the variant you're looking at. The base KX1 with 17-inch wheels manages 49.6 mpg on the combined cycle and 149 grams per kilometre of CO2. More typical mid-range variants with larger 18-inch wheels manage 47.1 mpg and 159 grams per kilometre. And we should give you some perspective on those figures. It's true that they are around 10% below the kinds of returns that you get from a comparable Land Rover Discovery Sport TD4 180 PS, but to be fair, this Kia is a little faster and a little bigger than that car. Otherwise, this South Korean model's efficiency stats fully endorse Kia's decision back in 2009 to change the platform that this Sorento sits on from a crude body-on-frame construction to a lighter and more car-like monocoque design. Look at the stats of some rivals that haven't made that switch, cars like Mitsubishi Shogun and SsangYong's Rexton, and you'll find that staying with those heavier, clunkier underpinnings has made them 30 to 40% more expensive to run. Now yes, those two competitors are better off-road as a result, but that is a big cost difference for owners to swallow. What else? Well, residuals will be important, figures that have gradually improved as Kia's standing in the market has improved. Used values will continue to be propped up by the brand's excellent 7-year warranty that, unlike some other programs, is fully transferable to second owners. Now, this promise of trouble-free motoring may be enough to tip the balance for many potential customers. Insurance groupings are also reasonable, enhanced by the low cost of repair and by the excellent safety provision. KX1 and KX2 models are rated at Group 24 and 25. The KX3 is rated at Group 26 and 27. The GT line is rated at Group 27, and this top GT Line S model pitches in at Group 25, aided by its extra safety kit. Servicing intervals are every 20,000 miles or 12 months, whichever comes around soonest, and you can keep maintenance costs down by opting for either of Kia's Care 3 all-inclusive servicing packages that provide inflation-proof servicing costs for the first 3 or 5 years of the vehicle's life. This improved version of the third generation Sorento tells us a lot about the way Kia is developing as a brand. We can see from this car how the company can now match its European rivals in terms of quality and technology, and we can see from this model's pricing that the Korean maker is still able to do this for the kind of money that can make its competitors look expensive. What the Mark III model Sorento also tells us, though, is that going forward, Kia isn't simply going to copy the more established marques for the sake of it. Specifically here, in creating this, well, potentially quite luxurious family 7-seat SUV, it wasn't prepared to compromise the honest, robust practicality which had characterized the previous versions of this design, merely to make this car a bit sportier. Now, as a possible buyer, you'll either like that or you won't. As with previous Sorento models, it's certainly true that there are trendier, more dynamic choices you could make. There are a few better all-round options though. After all, many of your other choices in this segment are either slightly smaller in size, or they limit you to 5 seats, or they provide significantly less power and SUV capability. To match what this Kia can offer, you either have to spend far more on a European rival, or consider this car's Hyundai Santa Fe design stablemate. Buyers who are trying this improved third generation Sorento now have good reason not to do either of those things. It undercuts that Hyundai rival on price, and its smooth new auto gearbox and its extra polish and cleverness now make choosing this car a more credible option for buyers who simply don't need the dynamic advantages on offer from the much pricier Land Rover and German branded models that you might be tempted by in this segment. Plus, as ever with this car, whilst those who are familiar with the Amalfi Coast might still feel that the Sorento is lacking an R, a glance at the spec sheet doesn't immediately suggest that it's lacking much else. In short then, for all kinds of reasons, this is now a contender that you'd like, rather than merely one that it would be very handy to have. The kind of SUV that might surprise you, as increasingly modern Kias tend to do.